am a census worker this year. So if you see somebody running around your neighborhood, they have to have a bag that has one of these big white things on it, where they have all the details. And they have to show you a badge. It looks like that. It's an official one. If they don't have that, they're not a real census worker. So why are we doing the census? Well, it's required every 10 years by law that we have to conduct a census. And we've been doing these since 1790. So this is the 23rd census. When you think George Washington was inaugurated our first president in 1789, one of the first things he did was make arrangements for the 1790 census. Now some people think it's too expensive. I mean, and it is expensive. It costs approximately $15 billion to conduct the 2010 census, which is almost NASA's budget, as it turns out. And that includes hiring over 600,000 temporary workers, of which I'm one. Now the preliminary data indicates that about 72% of the census forms, now if you remember, you may have seen the forms were mailed out along about March 1st, and about 72% of them were mailed back to the Census Bureau. So, given the estimated population of the United States at 320 million, that means that we got 87 million households to go visit over the next couple of months. And it's really important because it's how the government's money is divvied up to the communities. Take, for example, schools. Say you, in a neighborhood, you check the households and find that it has a larger percentage than normal of young married couples with one child under the age of 5. Well, that means you're going to have 3 kids hitting schools, or 1 kid hitting the school system in the next few years, right? Well, they also found out from analyzing past census data that a family with 1 child will have 2 more inside of the next decade, on average. That's going to be 3 kids per household hitting the school system. So, you got to make sure you got enough schools to educate all these children. According to the Tacoma News Tribune, they found that just missing, not counting 1 person per neighborhood will cost that neighborhood about $15,000 over 10 years. So, why do we do it? Well, you know, it also goes to pay for hospitals, emergency management, fires, roads, etc. Now some people are worried about privacy. They say, well, it's none of the government's business. You don't have any business asking me all these questions. Well, I got to tell you folks, if you live in our society, your privacy is long gone. If you got a bank account, if you got a driver's license, if you got health insurance, if you got a cell phone, there's lots of information out there about you, and it's not that difficult to obtain, believe me. There's a lot more known about you than the few questions we ask with the census forms, which is really name, age, gender, race, and whether or not you own your home. You know, in the 1930 census, one of the questions was about, do you have indoor plumbing? So, come a long way since then. All really you need to know is how many people live where. And I've got most of this data from a book called The American Census of Social History by Margot J. Anderson, published in 1988. Now within the census, they release the demographic data. How many people, where, how old they are, etc., but they don't release the names to go with that data. That's classified for 72 years. And some of the older censuses have been available, and you can go out to a website called Ancestry.com. And I went out there and looked at my father. Now I found him in the 1920 census. He was in an orphanage in Great Falls, Montana. He was 8 years old. His mother had died the previous year in the 1919 influenza epidemic. So he and his brother and sister were left at the orphanage. I found him again in the 1930 census. He was at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii in the Army, which coincidentally is where I was in the 1980 census. So, what do you do if a census worker knocks on your door? That's not it. Next slide. What you want to do is cooperate with them. I mean, this is one of your neighbors. You know, I've had some great chats with folks because I'm working within just a few blocks of where I live. And it only takes about 10 minutes, really. It's not that big a deal. Now some say that I don't like the government nosing around. It's none of their business what I'm doing. I don't want them knocking on my door. So why are we doing it? Well, because we have to. It's the law. And why is it the law? Well, The United States Constitution, right here in the very first article of the Constitution. They didn't put it in the 7th article. They didn't put it in the 3rd article. They put it in the very first article, just about 4 paragraphs in. And it reads like this. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to a service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of Congress of the United States and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. And that's right there in the Constitution. Now there is some regrettable language in there, that 3/5 compromise business. See, that was one of the big points of contention when they were trying to put together the Constitution. It seems the slave states wanted to count slaves as full people, because that would give them more proportional representation. Well, the free states didn't want to count slaves at all, because that would give them more proportional representation. So, the 3/5 compromise is what they came up with. Now that actually got eliminated in the 14th Amendment in 1868. But the bit about the Indians is still in there. Now you notice there's nothing in there about citizenship. I mean, it didn't really matter. Well, the oldest person born in the U.S. then was 6 years old. So why is it so important that they put it in the first article? The Federalist Papers. Now this is a series of essays published in the newspapers between the time of the ending of the Constitutional Convention and when it was ratified in 1789. These were written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, who was our first Secretary of State. And they were all published under the pseudonym Publius. It was after Publius Valerius Publicola, who was one of the founders of the Roman Republic about 500 BC. And what it is, it's an explanation of what's in the Constitution and why. Now right here in the bottom is where Madison actually talks about the reason for the census. And it's kind of lengthy, and I won't read it. But what he's really saying is the federal government could not conduct the census without the cooperation of the states. If the only purpose of the census was for taxation, then the states would be inclined to undercount their population so as to pay less taxes. If it was only for representation, they would be inclined to overcount their population so that they could get more representation. So by doing it this way, they acquired a balance. To conclude, the census is simply a count of who lives where and how many. And its primary purpose is to divvy up the federal pie. How much money does your community get? And its central concept of government as it was designed in 1787 by the founders. It has to be conducted every 10 years, and we are required by law to respond. It started. I want to close with the preamble of the Constitution. Pay no attention to the large bird. It goes, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Thanks. Blessings get played for a while. It cracked me up. That, by the way, is The Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa.
We, the people of
just said
the
that.
United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, bring environment rights and sparks, oh yes, and keep the world safe from weirdos. Never mind.
Questions?
Denise, can we get set up while we're doing that? We need Denise to start speaking in about 30 seconds.
Oh.
How bad is it if we don't provide our phone number?
Pardon me?
How bad is it if we don't provide our phone number?
It's not. You can refuse. In fact, you can refuse to answer any of the questions. All they really need to find out for sure is how many people live there, or lived there on April 1st. Yes?
Is it, how